The crystal wine glass shattered against the hardwood floor. Red liquid spread across the oak like blood from a fresh wound. But that wasn't what shattered. The wine had been in my face 3 seconds earlier. It dripped from my hair, stained my white dress shirt, and burned my eyes. Richard Montgomery, my father-in-law, stood at the head of the dining table with an empty glass in his hand and pure contempt in his eyes. Jessica, my wife's younger sister, laughed so hard she had to grip the table edge for support. "Thanks, Dad," she managed between gasps. "Maybe that'll teach him some respect." Filthy pig. I felt my hands grip the chair beneath me. The entire Montgomery family watched. Vanessa, my wife, sat frozen beside me, her face unreadable. Patricia, her mother, had a hand over her mouth. I couldn't tell if it was shock or suppressed amusement. Tyler, her brother, stared at his plate as if he wanted to disappear. I stood up slowly. The room went quiet except for Jessica's fading giggles. My fingers were steady, despite the rage coursing through me. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I scrolled to a contact I never imagined I'd use at a family dinner and pressed call. "Davies," I said when the line connected. "Execute everything we discussed." I hung up. The room was dead silent. Even Jessica had stopped laughing. They had no idea who they were dealing with. They had no idea what I'd built, what I controlled, or what I was about to take away from them. They were about to find out. My name is Connor Harrison. I'm 42. Until that New Year's Eve dinner, most people described me as quiet and unassuming, a man who worked in finance. Quiet didn't mean weak. Unassuming didn't mean powerless. I had spent the last 15 years building something bigger than the Montgomerys could comprehend. I had spent the last 6 months preparing for this exact moment. If you want to hear how everything unfolds, hit subscribe now. Drop a comment telling me what you would have done, and smash that like button. This story gets wild. The Montgomerys had never respected me. Not since the day I married Vanessa 8 years earlier. To them, I was the son-in-law, without old money, without the right pedigree. I didn't belong in their world of country clubs and charity galas. Richard made his fortune in commercial real estate in the 80s. He bought cheap, developed, and rode the wave of urban renewal. He considered himself self-made. That made his disdain for me especially ironic. I worked in finance. I ran a private equity fund that specialized in distressed assets, failing commercial properties. Companies on the verge of bankruptcy, developments that couldn't secure financing. I bought them for pennies on the dollar, restructured them, either turned them profitable or flipped them for substantial gains. My fund managed north of $300 million. My personal net worth was about $70 million. Vanessa knew the truth. She had seen the bank statements, signed the tax returns, but she never corrected her family's assumptions. That should have been the first warning sign. The insults started small. Jokes about my clothes. Tyler bragging about his law firm in a way that implied my work was less legitimate. Patricia asking when we'd buy a bigger house, as if our 4-bedroom colonial wasn't enough. Jessica was the worst. She married Bradley Cortland, a hedge fund manager, who loved to talk bonuses at dinner. "Bradley's firm projects 30% returns this year," she'd say, looking at me. "What kind of returns does your little fund get, Connor?" I would smile and change the subject. Let them think what they wanted. My fund had averaged 42% returns over the past decade. There was no point in correcting their narrative. The Montgomerys weren't interested in facts that contradicted their story. Vanessa had been different when we met. A curator at a contemporary art gallery, independent, passionate. I fell in love with her wit, her curiosity, the way she could talk about abstract expressionism and behavioral economics with equal ease. Over time, though, she drifted back into her family's orbit. She began attending more family events. She started adopting their attitudes. She began to look at me the way they did. 6 months before that New Year's dinner, things changed. Vanessa took calls in other rooms. She joined book clubs that lasted until midnight. She started getting her nails done and her hair colored with a frequency that felt excessive. I knew the signs. I hired a private investigator. Marcus Fleming was a former FBI agent running a discreet investigation firm. Within 2 weeks, he had everything: photographs, videos, phone records, text messages. Vanessa was having an affair with Jackson Sinclair, a gallery owner who had pursued her for over a year. They met at his downtown loft 3 times a week. Their messages were explicit and filled with mockery. "Connor has no idea," one read. "He's so clueless." I sat in my office reading those messages and felt something cold settle in my chest. Not heartbreak, clarity. The woman I married didn't exist anymore, if she ever had. What remained was a Montgomery who wanted an upgrade. I started planning. Richard's commercial empire wasn't as solid as it looked. I tracked his properties for years. 12 properties in the metro area. Mortgages coming due, underoccupied buildings bleeding cash, flagship tenants' leases expiring in months. I quietly positioned my pieces. I approached Richard's largest tenant through a third party and offered better terms in a building my fund owned. I spoke with the banks holding his mortgages and expressed interest in buying the notes at a discount if he defaulted. I gathered everything I could on every family asset. Tyler's struggling law firm, Bradley's underperforming hedge fund, Patricia's mountain of credit card debt by New Year's Eve. I had a complete picture of their fragile financial house. The dinner started normally. Fancy decorations, crystal everywhere, a catered meal. Richard held court. Tyler exaggerated a legal victory. Jessica and Bradley compared recent vacations. I ate quietly, my usual role. The polite son-in-law, who didn't measure up. Halfway through the main course, Richard mentioned a property bill, Hendrix's warehouse complex, and accused my firm of insulting an old relationship by offering 30% below market. I replied calmly that we offer what the analysis supports. Numbers speak for themselves. Jessica jumped in, drunk on wine and cruelty. "Connor doesn't understand how real business works," she sneered. "Bradley's firm says funds like his are vultures," Bradley added. I answered measured. "We provide liquidity. We save jobs. We create value." Richard stood up, enraged. "How dare you?" he demanded. "Insult me in my home, Vanessa." Instead of defending me, Vanessa said with cold detachment, "Connor, maybe we should leave." As if I were the problem, I walked toward Richard. Before I could speak, he flung wine in my face. The red hit me like a slap. Jessica laughed, delighted. "Maybe that'll teach him some respect, filthy pig," she said. Beneath the hot rage, calculation clicked into place. They had given me exactly what I needed. I pulled out my phone and called Davies. "Execute everything," I said. "Connor, what's happening?" Vanessa asked as I hung up. "I'm done," I said. "I'm filing for divorce. I'm filing assault charges against Richard, and I'm freezing marital assets." I showed them my phone. I had been recording. Richard couldn't deny it. In our state, as a participant, I could legally record the conversation. Davies filed motions to freeze assets and move to foreclose on 3 of Richard's properties. I told them I owned the mortgage notes. I had bought them months earlier. I called the loans due. They were past due. The room erupted in panic, but I wasn't finished. "Tyler, your firm is about to lose the Hendrix account," I said. Jessica asked Bradley about the redemption requests his fund had been getting. Patricia asked Richard about the second mortgage on this house. Faces went white. Bradley looked sick. Patricia's hand flew to her mouth. "Genuine shock this time." "You're a monster," Vanessa whispered. I looked at her. "I'm someone tired of being treated like nothing by people who are nothing," I said. I walked to the door, wine still dripping from my hair. At the threshold, I turned back. "Happy New Year, everyone. I hope it's everything you deserve." The next 72 hours were chaos. Davies moved fast. Vanessa received divorce papers on January 1st. Richard received foreclosure. Notices on January 2nd. Tyler's firm was notified. That the Hendrix account was leaving on January 3rd. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Vanessa called 16 times the first day. Tyler tried to negotiate. Patricia begged. I didn't answer. The PI's report on Vanessa's affair went to Davies. Under our state's laws, adultery would affect asset division. Vanessa wouldn't walk away with half. She'd be lucky to get 20%. Foreclosure took months, but the damage to Richard's reputation was immediate. Lenders called notes due. Tenants looked for other spaces. His empire began to crumble. I felt no gloating, only a cold sense of justice. A week later, Vanessa called. "Connor, please. We need to talk." I told her there was nothing left to talk about. I knew about Jackson. I had photos, videos, messages. She asked for counseling. I told her it wasn't about Jackson. It was about who she had become. She had allowed her family to treat me like trash. She had agreed with them. The divorce finalized 8 months later. Vanessa left with $200,000 and a car. Given my net worth, she'd expected more. At the final hearing, she looked smaller, like the Montgomery confidence had been stripped bare. She tried to approach me, but I walked past without a word. A year later, I was in my new office overlooking the skyline. My fund had grown to $400 million. I was negotiating more deals. My assistant announced a visitor, Amanda Richardson, a curator from the Contemporary Art Museum. She walked in with the quiet confidence of someone who knew what she wanted. We talked for an hour about art, urban development, and meaning. I committed $5 million to the museum's expansion. I asked her to dinner. She said yes. Amanda kept her apartment and her independence. She loved me because she wanted to, not because she needed to. That was the difference. 2 years after the wine incident, Amanda and I hosted a New Year's party at my penthouse. At midnight, she pulled me onto the balcony. "I love that you know your worth," she said. "You don't need anyone to validate you." I realized then that the Montgomerys had taught me an important lesson. Their attempt to make me feel small taught me to stop seeking approval from the wrong people. The best revenge wasn't destroying them. The best revenge was building a life so good they couldn't touch it. Richard thought, throwing wine in my face, put me in my place. What he actually did was set me free. For that, I suppose I should thank him. Have you ever had a moment where someone's disrespect pushed you toward something better? Share it in the comments below. If this story resonated, like and subscribe for more real stories about ordinary people finding extraordinary strength. Until next time, remember, sometimes the people who treat you worst teach you the best lessons about who you are and what you deserve.